Greetings, beloveds, and peace be with you. I'm Reverend Mitzi, and I'm so very glad you're here. Thank you for answering the divine call to watch, and welcome to Unity of Tempe online. A few days ago, I saw a brief interview with Anderson Cooper and Linda Bennington, the widow of Lincoln Park singer Chester Bennington, who died by suicide in 2017. And the interview greatly impacted me. I'll share more about this interview later, but as I watched the interview, it also reminded me that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I felt very strongly guided to share a message on the topic of mental health. Now, this is not something we usually talk a great deal about in Unity, but it is such an important subject. I was surprised as I did my research to discover that while Mental Health Month has received a lot more exposure in recent years, it was actually established in 1949. Now, it's intended to raise awareness and reduce stigma about mental illness, strategies for attaining mental health, as well as suicide awareness and prevention. And this topic of mental health is something that is very close to the hearts of both Ron and me, for his mother suffered from adult onset schizophrenia, and my birth mother, many of you know that I was raised by my grandmother, also has schizophrenia. And I also have a half sibling that had severe mental illness and who died. Now, this is a difficult topic to address, and it's a difficult topic to hear, but it's so very important for all of us, for in the spirit of oneness, we as disciples of the Christ presence desire to express love to all and to grow in awareness and understanding. And so I thank you for listening today. Now, I'm going to share some information compiled on the website on the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and that is also known as NAMI. And note that while terms like serious mental illness, or mental health disorders may all sound the same, they actually refer to different categories. As I share these statistics, some actually very sobering statistics, please know that if you or a loved one have experienced mental illness, you are not alone. Now, these statistics are from 2019. I think that statistics from 2020 may even be higher. 20.6% of US adults experienced mental illness in 2019. That's 51.5 million people, 1 in 5 adults. 5.2% of US adults experienced serious mental illness in 2019. That's 13.1 million people, 1 in 20 adults. 16.5% of US youth ages 6 to 17 experienced a mental health disorder in 2016, and that's 7.7 million people, 1 in 6. The average delay between the onset of mental illness symptoms and treatment is 11 years. At least 8.4 million people in the US provide care to an adult with a mental or emotional health issue. Now we're going to go to some other statistics which are staggering, and these statistics are about suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34, and the 10th leading cause of death among adults overall. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than straight youth. Transgender adults are nearly 12 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population. That is absolutely staggering. I had no idea. I knew that the numbers were high, but in doing the research, my heart just breaks. And I wonder, what can we do as a beloved community? Now, it's very important for me to say right now that if you or someone you know is in an emergency, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, that's 8255, or call 911 immediately. And if you did not get all that information, or you're thinking, I need to see that again, know that it's going to come up on the screen a couple more times during my message. So I want to go back now to what impacted me as I watched the interview between Anderson Cooper and Talinda Bennington, the widow of Lincoln Park singer Chester Bennington, who died by suicide in 2017. They discussed how a simple question that we often ask others can be problematic. And the question? The seemingly innocent, how are you? How are you? Why on earth can this question be problematic? Well, it can be problematic because far too often it's said as a greeting rather than a true inquiry. How are you? Often asked by smiling and well-meaning cashiers, though recently I have to admit that I've seen it more replaced by, did you find everything you need? Years ago, I remember being asked, how are you, by an unsuspecting clerk after my grandmother, the sole person who raised me, died. And I recall my embarrassment as I broke into tears. I was unable to control my emotion on being asked this seemingly innocent question. I remember that the clerk tried to comfort me to the best ability, but I remember I just wanted the ground to open up and for me to be swallowed. And interestingly, the same exact thing happened to Ron in a grocery store right after his mom died of COVID last fall. I also remember during difficult times being asked, how are you, by friends and even some in spiritual circles. Not my really true, absolute heart closest friends, but by friends nevertheless. And me feeling that if I truly shared, it would be too much. Intuitively sensing that these friends did not really want an in-depth answer, but instead what most of us reply when we're asked, how are you? An easy, good. And you? Or fine. And you? Without going into any real detail. And so the question and the answers sometimes felt inauthentic. So back to the interview. Talinda shared that people from other countries often find it strange how in the US we ask, how are you? Often without truly wanting to know or wanting to spend time listening. And Anderson shared how he has a friend in Israel, and once he asked him, what are you up to? And the friend was rather dumbfounded by this question. He said, I have no idea what you're asking. And after Anderson explained, he said, oh, well, in Israel, we tend to ask, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Perhaps a much more important question. Sometimes though, when someone genuinely wants to know how we're feeling, we actually may not be very in touch with our own emotions. And this was the case for me decades ago when I got sober. I remember how I'd look at the how do you feel chart, which I had on the back of my bathroom door. And this one that you're seeing right now, well, it only has a few feelings listed: angry, sad, happy, etc. But the one that I had probably had about 10 times those emotions, and I'd stare numbly at the chart, trying to align a feeling to where I was emotionally. Today, by the grace of God and decades of sobriety, decades of recovery, and a solid spiritual foundation, I usually know where I stand emotionally. Even if I'm having a bit of an emotional meltdown, I usually can go within and figure out what triggered me, look at myself, look at my response to a situation, and do inner work with the help of God. But so many people still struggle with knowing how they're feeling. So how can we help ourselves be more in touch with our feelings? And how can we help ourselves and others reduce anxiety, worries, stress, angst, and a whole host of other issues? Well, please note that this disclaimer: I am not a medical doctor or psychiatrist, and if you have a loved one or you yourself are having mental health challenges, please seek the advice of a trained medical professional. I am, though, a doctor of spiritual studies. And so what I'm sharing today is support for our spiritual nature. At our core, at the essence of who we are, the spiritual truth is that we are whole, perfect, and complete. That's at our spiritual core. Yet it seems like living in this world, all sorts of things can push us away from remembering that truth. And that makes perfect sense because we live on this planet at this time, and it can be extremely challenging. And part of healing is being able to utilize all of the tools at our disposal. Just as the body and mind are treated with medicines to restore mental wellness, it's also important to remember to treat the spirit, because after all, we are body, mind, and spirit. Now, fear. Fear can also arise as a byproduct of mental crisis or anxiety. And there can be fear that a situation being experienced will never change. The mental turmoil will never cease. We're never going to get past that. And people can think that. They can think that what's going on right now will never, ever be any different than it is. And people can feel trapped and hopeless. And incredibly tragically, this can lead to suicidal thoughts and worse and more. So remember again, beloveds, that if you or a loved one is currently feeling that way, please call 1-800-273-8255. Now, in last week's message, I talked about a core unity teaching, the foundational teaching of power from the 12 powers. So I want us to look again at one of the verses that I shared that last week, for it may be helpful if we're experiencing mental health challenges or if we are supporting loved ones through their own challenges. And this verse is from 2 Timothy. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, what's interesting about this verse is that fear is described as a spirit of fear. Fear is a spirit that wants to take the place of the divine, wants us to exchange our faith for knowing that God is always with us, for a dependence instead on fear. Now remember the demons that Jesus and his disciples cast out from people? They went around all over casting out many demons. Now, metaphysically, these demons may have been indicative of some sort of emotional turmoil or some sort of mental illness, something that was too overwhelming to deal with while gripped in a spirit of fear. So what does this living in a perpetual spirit of fear do? Well, it blinds us to the possibilities of our highest potential because it immobilizes us. The spirit of fear blocks us from receiving God's help to live the abundant, joyous life that we are meant to live and to express. Now, it's very interesting that in Scripture, the words "do not fear" or some form of those words, "do not be afraid, fear not," pop up 365 times. That's a fear not for every day of the year. Now, it's true that we all have fear come up. It's only natural. I mean, after all, we're living in this human world and it's challenging, extremely challenging at times. And there actually can be value in fear. It's not something that's meant to be ashamed of or condemned. Fear, though, it is a cause for pause. Let me say that again. Fear is a cause for pause, to pay attention to what's going on. It's a sign for us to pray, to listen for guidance and direction from God. Now, if we're feeling powerless, overwhelmed, we're most likely operating from a space of fear and not from our spiritual power. If we're feeling devoid of confidence, unloved, abandoned, betrayed, the spirit of fear could be binding us in mental chaos. Now, it's at these moments that it is crucial for us to realign with the divine, even when we feel we can't. In fact, especially when we feel we can't. It's so important to reach out to another. If you feel you can't pray, reach out to another. Have them pray for you and with you. You can connect with us on our Thursday Zoom call, even if you can't be there in person. And many of you have been doing that, texting me or Facebooking me or emailing me saying, please pray for me in this situation. And it's a joy and a privilege to do so. Now, the powerful thing about realigning with the divine to cast out the spirit of fear is that God reaches out to us as we reach out to God. God meets us where we are. I know I've shared this scripture before in messages, but it's such a good one. I want to share it again. God met me more than halfway. He freed me from my anxious fears. Say that with me. God met me more than halfway. He freed me from my anxious fears. And let's personalize it. God meets me more than halfway and frees me from my anxiety and fear. We're going to say this one more time, but if this is a slide that you need to take a picture of, I encourage you to do so. Put it on your heart and keep it with you all the time. God meets me more than halfway and frees me from my anxiety and fear. Yes, yes, yes. And why is this so true? This is so true because where is God? The divine presence of the Christ essence lives where? In us. In us. God can meet us more than halfway because God is within us, expressing as us. Now, sometimes it takes us being brave to move forward. It does, beloveds, doesn't it? I know that many of you have been very brave in many times during your life. And to anchor this message, there's a heartfelt song entitled Brave by Michael Kiziur.
It was a secret you were trying to keep, living in between life, somewhere out of reach. Everyday darkness takes a hold of you, dragging you under, blocking out the truth. If you feel like falling, you can hold on. If you think you're only getting weaker, you can still be strong. If you're feeling hopeless, you can have faith. If you think you've lost the will to fight and you're so afraid, you can still be brave. You can still be brave. One of life's mysteries happens all the time. Why do the good hearts suffer in their minds? Maybe they teach us what we need to know. Walking through hell's fire, letting heaven show. If you feel like falling, you can hold on. If you think you're only getting weaker, you can still be strong. If you're feeling hopeless, you can have faith. If you think you've lost the will to fight and you're so afraid, you can still be brave. You can do whatever it takes. Maybe you're just one step away. You can still be brave. Don't let go of all that you are. You've already come so far. If you feel like falling, hold on. If you're feeling hopeless, and if you feel like falling, you can hold on. If you think you're only getting weaker, you can still be strong. If you're feeling hopeless, you can have faith. If you think you've lost the will to fight and you're so afraid, you can still be brave. You can still be brave.
Wasn't that a powerful song? We can probably all relate to it. We've probably all experienced at some point of our lives some of the things that the song was addressing. So my prayer today is adapted from one on the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the NAMI website. We offer the prayer of truth that God will help us dispel ignorance and misinformation about mental illness. We offer the prayer of healing, that troubled minds and hearts, broken lives and relationships might be healed. We offer the prayer of understanding, that stigma, labels, exclusion, and marginalization might be dispelled for those touched by mental illness. We offer the prayer of hope for persons and families living with mental illness, for better treatment, for steadier recovery, for greater opportunity to work and serve. We offer the prayer of thankfulness for compassionate, dedicated caregivers and mental health professionals, for new discoveries in brain research and better medications. We offer the prayer of faith to dispel doubt and despair for those who have lost hope and are discouraged. We offer the prayer of love to remind us of God's love and to share the light of that love with those living with mental illness. Thank you, God, that this prayer is heard and answered, and so it is. Thank you, beloveds, for also sharing today's message with anyone you feel may benefit from it. It's now time for our financial blessings. We are so very, very grateful for those of you who partner with us. If you haven't had the opportunity to share, to tithe for a while, we invite you to do so, for it is what keeps Unity of Tempe going, alive and vibrant. There is no amount too large and no amount too small, and your amount is needed and appreciated. I invite you to join me in the blessing affirmation. I am a joyful sharer of my good. I remember that as I give, I receive, and that God is my source. Let's say it once more. I am a joyful sharer of my good. I remember that as I give, I receive, and that God is my source. Yes, indeed. You can make your financial blessing securely at unityoftempe.org or at our mail-only address, Unity of Tempe, 925 West Baseline Road, Suite 105/227, Tempe 85283. And so now I invite you to join with me in our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. All is well, and we are grateful. Yes, beloveds, we are so very, very grateful for you. I invite you to have a peace-filled week. Looking forward to the blessing of your presence Thursday, 10 a.m. for our Zoom prayer call, and Facebook Live, 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, and next week for another message. Peace, love, and blessings to you.